Hi, my name is Anita Jung, and I'm an artist in Iowa City, and I'm sitting in the exhibition Peregrination at the Hudson River Gallery. And this exhibition is, it embodies three different separate projects of work. The first is Love in the Time of Counting, which was created during the pandemic in 2020 in a borrowed studio out on the Hawkeye Athletic Campus, where faculty at the University of Iowa had studios. And then the second body of work, Infinite Polygons, and that is named about trying to make a circle out of straight lines. And so it's sort of about futility, and again it's about counting time and watching sort of the world passing by throughout the pandemic, which was sort of, I think a lot of us had that sense. And so then the third piece is travel diaries, because immediately after the initial wave of the pandemic, of the Omicron variant, I was able to fulfill a Fulbright in India, which had been postponed for 2.5 years. And so I was in India, and I was researching different artists who make prints. So I was contemporary printmakers in India, so I'm making a video about that for the Stanley Museum of Art. But while there, I was also just drawing on my own, and I sort of created this travel diary, and over the 6 months I spent in India, I created over 100 of these small drawings, just, again, sort of this idea of waiting. And so a lot of this work deals with that, just sort of very introspective, kind of quiet in self-reflection. The moments between moments is something that I'm very interested in, the everyday, in some ways just the mundane elements that are strung together that sort of create our life, or the pattern of our life and the background of our life, and then how we make things special. And that goes to my longtime interest in craft, and how craft in the United States, as well as in other countries, usually comes out of people trying to make something special or to acknowledge someone special. And so I'm very interested in those impulses. And then the title of the show is Peregrination, which a friend of mine, Rika, who lives in India, she was the person who suggested that title to me, and it's basically about journeying in a wandering and sort of meandering way. And when I look at the past 3 years, that's sort of the way I feel that my journey was taken. I was supposed to be going on a Fulbright in 2020, and it got postponed about three or four times. And so it's sort of, I'm about to go, and then I'm not going. I'm about to go, I'm not going. So it's always this constant movement and then a stop, movement, stop, movement, stop. And during that time, I just continuously made my art. I think that my interest in sort of those sort of the spaces between things has always is something that did develop in the work, and it is, my art is very closely related to my own philosophies about life and living and theories, and I do a lot of reading and of a broad spectrum of materials, and so the space between things is something that I find very compelling. It's almost like, if you think of the practice of mindfulness and things of that nature, that those connecting moments actually matter. They're lived moments, and so much of our time can be left waiting or anticipating and not just being, that driving in the car. And I can remember, when I was in college, my college roommate once turning to me and saying, everything is an adventure with you. She's like, like we're just walking down the street and something is going to happen. And I was like, yeah, something is always going to happen because it's happening right now. And so I really am very compelled by that. And, I can remember one of my earliest pieces right out of graduate school was a large series I did called The Sound of an Unspoken Word. Those kind of moments, those moments in between, the moment between our thinking and our speaking, the moments between our thinking and our acting. Those moments I find are compelling and important. And it's like John Lennon said, that life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. And I think that that's a real truth, that we make all kinds of plans, and then we are always interrupted to some level or not. Things never go as we think they should go. And often it's for the better in many ways, and it might take us a long time to realize or appreciate that, but it's up to us to make of those moments what we do. Well, one of the things that I am increasingly doing, so I've been making art professionally for well over 30 years. And at this point, my work is not so much about something as it is something. And so it's much more just allowing the filter and the distillation of experience and of where I'm at sort of traveling through me. I have a good foundation, a good base, and this is 3 years of work, and yet I think it goes very, there's an obvious conversation between these bodies of work. And that comes from who I am and who I've developed into being as an artist. And so the work from India definitely has a lot of influences, elements, things that I found. I can look back at them and I can remember, oh yeah, I was in Goa, or I did that on the train when I was traveling from Pune to Mumbai, or different elements. Like I can remember parts of them, but they weren't done about a specific thing as much as an influence. I think it's the repetitive and the patterning. There's a lot more of that in all of these works. I'm very captivated with that. My background is in painting and drawing, and then I did my MFA at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in printmaking. And so I'm very interested in what it means to have a repetitive object. And I'm very influenced by the pattern and decorative movement of the 70s. People like Miriam Shapiro is sort of one of my art heroes, and as well as artists that don't use color, like Ava Hess, that uses raw form and sort of lines to make connections. And so I'm really interested in a lot of different artists, but those artists I think are very influential in those movements. Also Art Bovera is something, so I really enjoy making art. I'll be captivated by a scrap of paper that is cut, or a piece of wood, or like just to bring different materials, scraps and things that are thrown away into the work, into the influencing of the work. Some of this work has some early pieces that really influenced it, which was a piece of cardboard that a student at the university had been practicing cutting on the laser cutter, and then just, it was thrown out. It wasn't meant to be art, but that shape captivated me because it was so abstract, and it had this sort of anonymous aspect to it, and it was very authentic in a way. It wasn't meant to be anything. It wasn't trying to be anything. It just was. And that's something that I'm very interested in. All of these bodies of work represent a lot more work is in in their sort of groupings, but I did try to keep to just 3 sizes, but I think that there's a really nice dialogue between pieces, and that's something that I also really, I appreciate in my own work, is that there can be a conversation with a single piece, but then amongst them. I always like the associations and the reflections, and then they kind of draw out from one another. And so I always find that interesting, and it's just a real treat to see how someone hangs your work, and especially someone with lots of experience like Nick. So.